Okie doke. Well, welcome to our regulars and fulsome thanks, I must say, to the League of Women Voters and American Association of University Women for the leap of faith that they've taken into working with the ever mercurial sustainable Hudson Valley. Cindy and Lynn, do you want to just do your one-liners that you've been honing each evening?
Okay, I'll go first since I'm ready. My name is Cynthia Bell, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson region. Sponsoring this program is in keeping with our league's stated mission to educate and advocate, and we are proud to sponsor this work. Thank you.
And my name is Lynn Gore. I'm the president of American Association of University Women, or AAUW Kingston. And our mission is to advance gender equality for women and girls through research, education, and advocacy. And STEM is a very important part of what we do at AAUW. So I'm very happy to be here, and welcome to Susan for being with us today.
All right. So I am Melissa Everett. I'm the executive director of Sustainable Hudson Valley. I am going to do my best to give a cogent presentation, record it all, take breaks for questions, and pay attention to who's landing in the waiting room. Wish me luck.
Good luck.
Nobody get rowdy on me here.
Okay.
All right. So this is the third in a series of 4 sessions about the Regional Climate Action Roadmap and Toolkit that we have facilitated creation of. And it is because the climate crisis is huge and pressing, and because the opportunities for climate action are really spectacular in terms of how we can recreate our communities and our relationships. I'm going to share screen and walk you through the first segment of this. I've done this before, but I don't think we have it. I don't think it's too much. I've become really passionate that we all have to understand very thoroughly what's going on with climate and the confusion in the air regarding climate, so that we can be active, clear citizens, resist misinformation, and really help. I like to say we preach to the choir so that the choir will sing more sweetly. And we want the choir to sing sweetly so that the congregation will be motivated. Because when the congregation is motivated, then they reach out and engage with the community. And that is actually a kind of well-documented theory of change called social diffusion of innovations. And so we are the choir. I want to, I'm going to go into slideshow mode, and just give us a little background on what's going on with climate change, New York's climate law, pushback against New York's climate law, and why we have the regional roadmap and toolkit. So doesn't need to be belabored. It's here and now. This 1.5 degrees centigrade is it's a consensus of thousands of experts and policymakers spitballing their judgment on what is worse than it can ever get. What is just too bad? It's bad now, but 1.5 centigrade is when it gets really bad and potentially gives rise to the kinds of tipping points that we just can't allow. And so to do this by 2030, that's the point, requires the achievement of the Paris Agreement pledges and more. So warmer, wetter, and weirder, we're all experiencing. Current trends are going to make Westchester County and the whole Hudson Valley pretty different. Projections are by the 2050s, Dobbs Ferry, 40 to 60 days over 90 degrees. Sea levels have risen a foot. They're set to rise more. climate change is a threat multiplier. It's hotter if you don't have air conditioning. You're more flood vulnerable if you live in a basement apartment. The public health stresses are the worst for communities where there's already public health issues. And to put it more positively, wellness and well-being and health and vitality are what we need to preserve for all of us in order to take the kinds of action that we need to take. So climate change is an invitation to change our systems of power generation, how we heat and cool our buildings, how we get around, to farm and manage forest lands in ways that regenerate natural systems, to design our physical environment and also our communities for resilience. And I am emphasizing more and more how clear it is to me that if we're trucking everything, if we're trucking our waste to landfills and our food from across the country, it's intrinsically not resilient. And relocalization, reinvestment in our communities and our neighborhoods and our local economies is the essence of productive climate action that is also designed for co-benefits. So the notion of carbon budget and living within our budget is critical. And that budget is the amount of emissions that correspond to a given, amount of warming. There's a direct correlation. To stay within that 1.5 degrees that I mentioned, we have 250 gigatons left. And at the rate we're emitting, that lasts until 2030. And that's when the tipping point risks like Arctic melting and methane release or dieback of the Amazon rainforest, which is that would not then be there so much as a carbon sink, that kind of stuff starts to become more likely. And so the decade packaging of this, the setting the goals by 2020 and 30 and 40 and 50 is not arbitrary. It's based in modeling of the changes that are underway and that we're trying to prevent. That sets the stage for understanding New York's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which was passed in 2019 and was designed for us to turn the corner to be mostly decarbonized by 2030, with a goal of 70% of electricity statewide from renewables, distributed solar, energy storage, homes electrified or ready to be, transportation, not just electric passenger vehicles, but beginning trucks and buses. And who knew it? The Metropolitan Transportation Authority, MTA, actually signed on to the Paris Agreement. So there's decarbonization happening. And this policy framework was designed to guide it and to create a funding mechanism called Cap and Invest, in which polluters pay increasingly over the years, and those funds support the changes that we need to make. Not everyone is happy with this law. And I just want everyone to meet my best buddies, Warm Thoughts Communications. They are a Beltway communications firm that basically created the playbook for confusing the public. They work for folks like the propane dealers and other gas utilities. Their message is the Climate Act goals are arbitrary. We need an all of the above energy strategy. So fossil and renewables, it's all good. And it is a message that has led to a lot of confusion. It's not everybody who is concerned about how in the world we're going to achieve the Climate Act goals is sinister. It's an incredibly ambitious program. There are legitimate questions about how we're going to pull it off. But, they're coming for your gas stove is a little much. So that's the setup. what the Climate Act, the implementation went through a 2-year process called scoping plan. The Climate Action Council was appointed state agency heads and volunteers from all over. They talked to the truckers, they talked to the farmers, they talked to the aviation industry, they, talked to the utilities. They sifted through 20,000 public comments rather, and really figured out how to implement the climate law with policies and programs that would be fair and doable. They even created this thing called the Office of Just Energy Transition within the Department of Labor, so that people from the fossil fuel industry whose jobs are displaced would have a place to go. So with that, I truly think there are 3 possibilities that will be determined by what we do together and people like us. The climate law could happen to us with more and more executive orders and state policy push and, plenty of disgruntled people. It could fall apart because of the loss of momentum. Although I hand it to NYSERDA and the DEC especially, that they are just working away. But the third thing that could happen, and I have faith in, is creative local and regional responses that will allow all of us to own this and define what we want to do. That is the setup for the Regional Climate Action Roadmap and Toolkit. That's what we want to offer, to help people get out of combat mode and think about all the different aspects of implementing the climate law that we can do in our own ways, in our own communities. This was a critical path analysis. What do we need to get done on the ground? It was done by, I counted, I think 90-ish stakeholders who, some consistent partner organizations and then some co-authors who came and went. It focuses on the climate law, but it's independent, focuses on courses of collective action for the Hudson Valley. And here are some of the partners that showed up repeatedly. You can see very diverse. And within the Ulster County Executive's Office, we had a Deputy Executive, Evelyn Wright, and also Tim Wiedemann, who was the Economic Development Director, working closely with us. 3 guiding questions. What's the critical path to achieving New York's 2030 and 40 climate commitments on the ground? Who needs to be involved? And what can we, this self-appointed inner circle, do that is useful? We have talked in previous sessions about electric power buildings, transportation, and the carbon footprint of garbage and materials. And there will be recordings available, but I will just say that the what can we do generated by this work has included opening up a dialogue with Central Hudson so that communities planning for renewable energy installations is better coordinated with the utilities plan for upgrading the grid. The work that we have identified includes coordinating among the county resource recovery agencies to help them find new markets so they're landfilling less stuff. And we've helped them connect already to better ways to recycle textiles and glass. So it's pretty cool. And so tonight's topic is really big. But it is the ways that we use land and water, the way we regenerate resources, the whole approach to our resource management. So I'm gonna go through a combination of what we need to understand about the scoping plan and state policy, and what's being done and can be done in our Hudson Valley. Farms, forests, and land conservation are more important than ever. The scoping plan specifically talks about improving the energy footprint of farm operations, encouraging renewables and efficiency on the farms, protecting farm land as a carbon sink, preserving forests and managing them soundly, because they aggressively sequester carbon. Expanded land and water conservation all around. There has, since the climate law was passed, Governor Hochul has put forward an executive order. She might have actually signed a law, but anyway, New York is bound to conserve 30% of our land and water by 2030. I think that was actually a law that was passed. The executive order was 25 million trees by 2030 planting, and that's a lot of trees. And planting trees is not a trivial activity. It requires correct selection, it requires maintenance. And the scoping plan refers particularly to building a supply chain of native trees and investing in the Saratoga plant nursery. And I've learned that Hilltop Hanover Farm is also doing its own work to build the native plant and tree supply chain. I don't know about you. This stuff is so interesting to me and so exciting. So what's called regenerative agriculture. I remember a couple generations ago when industrial agriculture was just kind of being promoted at the federal level. And there was a federal secretary of agriculture who kept saying, get big or get out. And now we're learning the importance of the small farm and of all of the regenerative practices that draw more carbon into the soil. Low and no-till, perennials and cover crops, nutrient management, soil amendments like biochar. What we learned in working with stakeholders from Cornell and some of the growers associations and is that it's easy to say regenerative agriculture is good in general. Farmers are happy to innovate when they are confident in the innovation. They'd be toast if they weren't, but they need to see the new practices proven in the specific soil types and with the specific crops that they work with. So that's the work that's going on. And Cornell Cooperative Extension and the College of Natural Resources were very involved, and Scenic Hudson was very involved in this work, and they are fully engaged in that kind of stuff. And the other thing that we identified is that there's plenty of money for farmers in general, but our small farms getting enough of it, and our funders circling back to make sure that the funding meets the farmers' needs. So the second piece of this is forestry. And forests are the single most critical carbon sink. And forests are struggling. I mean, we've got invasive plants, we've got deer chomping the understories, we've got a lot of issues going on. And there are very few foresters for publicly owned land. So managing today's forest for climate benefits and forest health is critical. We are now sharing our office with Winnicke Land Trust, which is run by a professional forester. And I've been soaking up learning that they are working to build more funding and support and partnerships for active forest management and increasing the professional forester cadre that it takes. Creating tomorrow's forests is also a commitment of the scoping plan. And I'm expecting there will be some resources through the Bond Act to do that. There's, also the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, DEC, lots of resources. But it's not trivial to determine where the trees should go, where they can be maintained, optimizing the selection. I'm excited to share that Groundwork Hudson Valley in Yonkers has gotten a major grant to do forest and landscape workforce development. multi-year grant, including paid internships. So farms and forests, yay. Solar panels, yay. What do we do when there's a conflict between those uses of the land, which, raise your hand if you haven't seen that in your community. It's kind of prevalent. This is one of the things I'm most encouraged by, because before we had even published the strategy, some of our collaborators were starting to tackle this on the ground. Scenic Hudson has created a mapping tool, How to Solar Now, and it basically helps a town planning board or a climate commission to unpack, what kind of soil, what kind of access to the grid, what kind of land, and find already disturbed land. There is also a program that NYSERDA created called Build Ready, where they have staff that are out scouting for commercial rooftops and big old parking lots and closed landfills and those things in order to develop renewable energy, not where the farms and forests are. And so New Yorkers for Clean Power and Manajo, when she was at Clearwater, and now in the Ulster County Legislature, have been working with quite a few towns to identify the best sites for renewable energy that don't compete with farms or forests. And we have just, in fact, today, met with Central Hudson to begin figuring out how to align this with their planning for upgrading the grid. There is also this, you may have heard of agrivoltaics. It's a thing. It's a cool thing. No, Simon, I can't talk. Agrivoltaics is multiple land uses. It's more prevalent in Europe than here, but Cornell College of Agriculture and Life Science is researching like crazy, and the Agritech Center in Highland is studying the impacts on soil and test plots and beginning to develop a program for putting solar arrays in between rows of fruit trees and grapevines, which I just think is the coolest thing. And so it's forests and farms and energy siting and reconciling those things, but it goes to the core of our land use planning. Sprawl is not good for climate any more than it's good for the economy. And this, I kind of buried in here the central project that we came up with to work on, but it's to create a flexible network of experts who can help when a town is ready to redo its comprehensive plan, or when a town faces a really serious development pressure, the big warehouse that lands from nowhere. We have folks from Scenic Hudson and watershed associations and so forth who can help. We've been collecting model planning and zoning ordinances and stuff. I give huge credit to Partners for Climate Action, which has developed a really good set of resources on their website. And to the Hudson Valley Conservation and Affordable Housing Strategy. This is something we had nothing to do with, but I have to shout out to them because it's a great project to build on. A group of planners and local officials basically figured out where there's political willingness to do land conservation and affordable housing in and around the same areas, but kind of put everything where it made the most sense. And they came up with several dozen, towns and villages where there's a commitment to both of those things. And those will be good places to prioritize renewable energy development. But there's an awful lot wherever your local government, wherever you live, a lot of land use planning tools, a lot of model language, rural communities, preservation language. The city of Kingston has done some really creative stuff with form-based codes, which is just a more flexible way of determining appropriate land uses. And so you've all heard the term smart growth, developing in compact ways, developing where there's already infrastructure. That was hip and cool 20 years ago. It's kind of lost cachet. But the line we came up with is make smart growth impossible to ignore. Kind of restore that as the default by reminding people how easy and valuable it is. So a few other facets of resilience, and you don't have to read all this. I'm going to show the slides, but just shorelines. What doesn't help is hardening them. Bad for storm surge, bad for public safety. What does help is mixed uses and adjusting the land so that it can absorb more water. And City of Kingston, with some of its waterfront parks, has been an especially good model. And I just love this picture because this is an example of a shoreline with multiple uses and vegetated rather than paved surface that works. We're having both more water and less water in a changing climate, right? Crazy erratic rainfall, storms, floods, and droughts, and green infrastructure, rain gardens, even green roofs. All of the planting that we can manage is really helpful. And this was not what I thought we would have here for a picture, but this is our Planting Power Newburgh project. We did 49 fruit trees in the fall. This is in front of Newburgh Free Academy. It was a wonderful project. We're doing rain gardens and shoreline stabilization plantings in the spring. Watersheds. Planning for healthy watersheds has always been important. It's more important and there's more detail to it in light of climate change. One of our partners is the Quassaic Creek Watershed Alliance. They're very thoughtful, and they came up with important features of planning for watersheds. So water efficiency and conservation for the water utilities is more important than ever, and even requiring them to have adaptation plans is more important than ever. Protecting wetlands, stricter standards for reducing water loss and dealing with leaks, right-sizing culverts and storm retention ponds, increasing sewer capacity, all this infrastructure stuff, is more important than ever to keep the watersheds healthy. And climate resilience is also about human impacts. The state this year put together an extreme heat action plan, and I think it's in draft form and will be published. But the draft, on the one hand, I give them credit for doing it, for just saying, we got to go there. But it is not what I would call heartening, because it's basically, all right, it's gonna get hot, you guys. Find a way to stay cool. But just to direct everyone to be thinking about it, is critical. And all those heat pumps that are good for energy efficiency. In fact, see that if you don't have them yet, that's my ductless mini split air source heat pump. That sucker air conditions like crazy. And they are quite affordable. But in terms of human impacts and what I was talking about before, that we've got to pay attention to our own resilience as a foundation for all the action we have to take. If you every now and then feel kind of wigged out and stressed thinking about climate change, you can take heart but from the fact that the American Psychological Association says a whole lot of people are feeling that. But I think as we work together on climate action, really setting a norm of taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other and doing things that promote health is going to be like what makes this stuff work. So climate safe neighborhoods, just understanding the need. What I've been talking about is resilience for natural systems and land use to balance climate goals. What I'm going into talking about is what we saw as the biggest gap, which is resilience at the scale of neighborhoods. Just look around, like where you live, who's paying attention to heat waves and to floods and to storm safety. So these maps were done by the Vassar College mappers with guidance from Groundwork Hudson Valley. And we're looking right now at Newburgh, and we're looking at the city of Newburgh is in this black line and the town is surrounding. And you see the yellow and the red is areas where there's commonly heat island effect. And why is that? Over this other map, you will see that there's tree cover in parts of the city and there's not so much tree cover in parts of the city. And the city of Newburgh, I happen to have learned, has over 3,000 empty tree pits where trees have not survived or have not been maintained. And so this is an environmental justice issue, and it goes back to the point that climate change does not affect everybody equally. Poughkeepsie, same story. And so there is a model that we have learned a lot from, the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program in Yonkers, where they actually sit down in some of those neighborhoods with community members and especially young people and say, let's look at this map. What do you think about this? How would you like to change your neighborhood? And they do the tree planting and they do the rain gardens and they do the clean energy stuff, but they do it from the basis of assessing their surroundings kind of for themselves. There is more and more of this work in local climate action planning. I trust you're all familiar with the Climate Smart Communities program, and it's a massive resource. And they have Cornell Cooperative Extension as a funded partner to help towns do resiliency plans at no charge. The town of Gardner recently did one, and they made a pretty comprehensive website on disaster and emergency preparedness that has a lot of explanation of how the system works, a lot of resources that are useful to any town. And so that gets us to what Sustainable Hudson Valley and Friends have been doing around this theme of climate safe neighborhoods. Actually, I was so excited when we published the roadmap. We got an email from Rebecca Smith Aldrich, the executive director at the Mid-Hudson Library Association. And she said, I'm so mad at you. You didn't mention libraries as a place to work with. And I said, oh, libraries, got it. Here we go. And out of that came a partnership. They already have a program called Library of Local. And so now we have the public library as resilience hub. And we are in the midst of a contract to train public librarians and all the things they can do, first in their building and then in their neighborhood, to promote climate resilience. And it's, Resilience Hub is a community serving facility. It can be a cooling center when it's hot. It can be a place to gather if there's an emergency going on. It's certainly a source of resources and education on how to deal with stuff. And, we are in the process of helping them learn about how do you fund a microgrid for solar and battery storage, how to get your mini splits or whatever for cooling, flood resilience, and education and community events. And that's been wonderful. And I will just mention the person who put this, just to name a few, Alyssa Rivera is our new Climate Justice Fellow, and she's assisting with this program. She's just out of SUNY. This is her first job, and she's supporting work with the public libraries as they work with their communities. And so what you can do for climate resilience is also what you can do to really reimagine the place where you are. So these are obviously rain gardens, and here's a rooftop rain garden. And this is in Hoboken, where we've got a huge slide library of pictures. They've narrowed the streets and made more pervious sidewalk and rain gardens that also have public seating for people to be out and about and, interact with their neighbors. So it's really about re-envisioning the public spaces, how we use land, how we manage water, how we designate what we're doing and where and how. And so this is an image you'll see again if you join tomorrow when we talk about capturing community benefits, but it comes from the Project for Public Spaces. Cynthia Nikitin, who's our library project lead, worked with them for 28 years, helping people to think, how do I redesign my place so that I can get around in it, I can connect with people in it. It has multiple uses, be it, sports, art, walking around, gardens. It's comfortable, it's aesthetic. And so we are hoping that the work that needs to be done for more climate resilient neighborhoods is not just an engineering project, but it's really a kind of a revitalization project that helps people to think, how do I want the blocks around where I live to be, and how can we come together to redesign the places where we live. That's what I've got on this topic. I have a little more before we stop, just about what we're doing with the roadmap overall. But questions, comments? And I didn't ask you to introduce yourself in the chat, but this is a somewhat different group than before. So please do.
I didn't hear any talk about reeling in the waste. So I know that waste management is another big issue. Like,
yes, we
for
did
us
that
to
one.
learn to waste less,
Yes, absolutely. We talked about waste and materials at this lunchtime session yesterday, but I think your point is not just the materials, but the cultural habit, and how if we're not drowning in junk, we're more resilient. If we're in control of our material lives.
Or food too, which if people don't compost, it's going to end up in the landfill also.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And rotting food we know is methane. So
yep.
that
Yep. And one of the things I showed yesterday, there's a graduate student from Ulster County, Nick Catania. He got his master's degree in Norway, and his research was based on the food scrap law, which says that big generators of food scraps, like institutional ones, have to compost it if they are within, I think it's 10 miles of a composter or a digester. And what he did was a map of where you could put methane digesters all around the region that would make pretty much everybody accountable to use them. Digesters and composting facilities. So I will circulate that recording.
I had a couple of questions about terminology. What is bioswales? That was on one of the.
Yeah, it's like, as I understand it, it's like a rain garden, but more engineered.
Okay,
So it's a structure with plants and soils and natural materials that is designed to kind of absorb water and move it.
so
Let-
probably on a bigger scale rain garden. Okay, and afforestation.
Afforestation is
Okay.
creating new forests, whereas
Oh, okay,
reforestation is putting back a forest that used to be there.
okay. And the third one was nutrient management. So what do you mean by that? Is that fertilizer or,
Yeah, and there might be more
enrich?
real farmers around this circle than I am, but things like nitrogen that farms give off, making sure that that goes in the right place.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I mean, I know this is stuff that is, I guess, mainly relevant to local government, but a lot of you are active in local government, and a lot of these same things are relevant if you own a property, if you own a business, if you're involved in how your neighborhood uses land.
I love the library thing. That was really inspirational
Yeah.
because that's one place really close that has a wider reach than, because my town, the town government doesn't care. We're not a climate smart community. We've been begging.
You're a climate dumb community.
We are. Well, I'm going to bring that one up. Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
We
Should
have
we be
good
making a
volunteers.
plan? Should we be figuring out how to crack that?
Oh,
Offline?
yes, I have been, yeah, any
All right.
time.
Offline, let's talk.
Yeah, so, and while we're on, I just want to thank Hannah for, checking in with some of those bills. And letting us know that the legislation had passed in the chat,
Ooh, check.
right?
Wait a minute.
No problem.
You're
Wait,
a
Hannah,
great
actually
resource.
tell us. You want to just read it?
Sure. So there was a legislation passed in December 2022 that does that Governor Hochul is asking the state to work on and create more like local action to reduce use of water and land by 30%. I will admit that I did not look too in depth on that, on like what the details are of that, and like what does that really imply? What are local governments expected to do under that? And I am newer to New York State, so I'm just getting up to speed on all of the local legislations.
Yeah,
Okay,
they'll have
great,
to
though.
actually have metrics to know what 30% less is. And I don't know
Yeah.
that we are making those metrics now, so.
I think what the legislation is about is identifying 30% of our land mass and of our water resources
Okay,
and putting them under some kind of conservation status.
okay.
But I too have got to read the darn thing.
Yeah, and just on first like thought of what that means, I would think it would mean like creating more parks or parks that must be protected, not to like add drilling sites or more landfills or things like that.
Joe is trying to raise her hand, but I think you're unmuted. You look unmuted to me. Or if that is working, maybe put a comment in the chat and I'll watch for it.
Or try muting and unmuting again.
Yeah, somebody else say something so she doesn't feel like everybody's staring at her.
I had a real quick thing I heard on the radio was, I think it was in Wisconsin, that the libraries were doing lending other things besides books, including something that you would go buy and use once a year, like a house the water sprayer, or a tool that you only need once. And so why go buy it and then add it to your collection of stuff when you can borrow it from the library? I thought, what a great idea, to have a lending of tools and things like that at a library. That should cut down on trips to Home Depot.
Yes, there's one of those up in Hudson. There's one of those in the Florida library right outside Warwick. And there's some of that in the Library of Local program, which is, I think, at 16 libraries in the Mid-Hudson system. They have some of those, and they also have seeds. How cool is that?
Right? See, I like the idea of libraries too, because people are reading newspapers less. And therefore, to have a central place where you could get your information and what's happening in your community, I think is a great idea. Because that's one place that we all know we could go for information.
Yeah, and they've been wonderful to work with.
And nobody has a position about libraries. Libraries are secular, non-political. They're just a great resource, and they're willing to work with people. And what they do can actually start making the grassroots, the buy-in from the public.
And they're free.
And they're free.
Is there anyone here that works at a library?
No, but I'm a member.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, if we all feel like we could go to our library and ask for, moving towards putting solar panels or expanding the mediums of lending that they have and whatnot.
Yeah. You're at Bard, right?
I am, but I live in Germantown, so I use the library
Carroll
there too.
Library and Rhinecliff Library are extremely advanced in this stuff, as is Kingston Library and Adrian's in Poughkeepsie. There's a National Sustainable Library Certification Program that Rebecca Smith Aldrich, who's the director of the Mid-Hudson system, was actually one of the architects of. So the Hudson Valley has a lot of libraries that have been serious about this for a while.
And a lot of the smaller towns, like the town I live in, they have a library also. And the smaller the town, the more that people really rely on the library as a community hub. Joe has made a comment. Just
right. Excellent. I am a landowner looking for alternatives to selling land to be developed for low-income housing. Can you clarify? So you want to keep your land but figure out how housing could be developed, or you want to see housing developed in other ways? I can mention that the city of Kingston has passed a law allowing for accessory dwellings on land. And they even did a design competition and got some really interesting ones and funded some prototypes. So that's one approach. If I misunderstood your question, keep trying. Anyway, let me just sort of in terms of where this whole project is going, the climate roadmap has been a discussion draft for at least a year. And part of that is because we got so buried with projects in the fall and winter, but it's also ripened, and more people have come around the circle to be interested in it and added flourishes. We are adding kind of performance measures. We're noting how much renewable energy we've got, how many buildings have been decarbonized to date, statistics on electric vehicles and on the road and so forth. And we, still figuring out the right numbers for materials management and some other stuff. But we are working on using this as a kind of a platform for tracking how we're doing as a region. We had the first annual Climate Solutions Conference last March, and we're going to have the second one sometime in early to mid-June at SUNY New Paltz, and we'll make sure you all hear about it. And we hope that'll be a place to, look at what we've gotten done in the last year and who's doing it, and, challenges we need to overcome. And we are working on which of the collaborators, are really like happy this is done, and which of the collaborators might want to bring their organizations forward to be partners in implementation strategies. So that's, messy, but happening. And I think I scared Cindy by saying this, so no obligation, Cindy and Lynn, but I would like to offer this series again in about 3 weeks. And hopefully everybody who's participated can spread the word, and we'll have a much larger audience, but we'll have an audience that represents some of the collaborating organizations. So that we're kind of building a learning network. It's not everybody in the room all at the same time, but it's still a pretty good network.
Well, this is what I'm finding. I'm an individual. I don't represent an organization. And as you mentioned before, this seems to be like more of a political and local coming together. And a lot of the workshops that I go on, people want to know individually, what can I do? Other than joining up with other people, because I'm so busy and I work and I got kids and all this stuff is crazy, right? To like know what I can do individually, like to support maybe these groups that are doing these things. I know in my town there's a smart community, and they said plant a bee garden, which I'd love to do. I'd love to stop mowing my lawn totally. Right now I only mow the front so my neighbors don't get upset, and my backyard I'm trying to leave wild. I have about a half an acre of, I don't want to call it forest, but trees.
Nice.
Right. And I'm adjacent to an old apple orchard. And I see, I see skunk and possums and, but I live in suburbia. And yet there are all this wildlife, deer and the squirrels, birds, right, that seem to be affected by these changes too. And I wonder who's advocating for them in their little piece of the woods. Like, all right, the feral cats eat the mice. Do the mice care? I think the mice care that they're being.
Yeah. I put a few things in the chat. Rewiring America is really good on all the home electrification and EV and all that stuff. Homegrown National Park.
Yes, I'm part of that.
Yeah, it's a national network of people who are kind of rewilding their properties and, trying not to freak out their neighbors, but planting natives, removing invasives, creating connectivity for habitat. I think, you know, you don't have to poke too much in most towns to find that kind of stuff. And also, Library of Local program, it's 16 libraries. I don't know them off the top of my head. But if you look for Library of Local, the resources in those libraries will help you as well.
You mean my local library, or is this
No, so the program is called Library of Local.
okay?
It's the Mid-Hudson Library Association put it together with Partners for Climate Action. It's got seeds, it's got books, it's got programs, it's got stuff. And so it's a place to go and just kind of learn, you know, answers to your question.
Yeah, and like rewiring my house, or I inquired as to heat pumps, and I would have to up my ampage because I live in an old house, right? 1960, I think it was born. I'm
Yep.
actually older than my house. So I know it was in worse shape. I inquired about solar, and they were like, we'd have to cut down all your trees in the backyard. And
Yeah, so okay, you want community solar, you can sign up for community solar farm.
I
And
saw that.
yeah, go to our clean power guide. It's on upstatehouse.com, and you'll see some ads and references for energy auditors who can help you with your strategy. Tomorrow at noon, we're going to do capturing community benefits, and that is those cross-cutting themes of environmental justice, of economic development, resilience we'll touch again, and education. And that will be the fourth in this series, with thanks again to the League and AAUW and all of you. And I will send around when we have dates for the next series.
Thank you. That
Does
was
that-
an excellent presentation.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you for all the resources.
Oh, and
Yeah,
now
that's great.
You're a wealth of knowledge.
I am almost done the slides for tomorrow. I'm gonna stop recording before I make a complete